Welcome to COVID-19 Tough Decisions for Business Owners, and today's episode is Business Survival 2.0, Case Studies and Open Forum. So I'd like to welcome all of our participants who are listening live, as well as those that will listen to our recording after it is done. So let me start by just doing a few little housekeeping things. I do have two of my team members, Jenny Ho and Diane Matthew, here. If you have questions that you want to pose and you don't want to forget them, put it on the chat line. And you can do that either as public to everyone, or you can privately enter it to Jenny. I would ask that you send that email to Jenny. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to share my screen with the group. So just let me get going here. Okay. So we started the webinars, actually it's 4 weeks ago, and we've been doing bi-weekly webinars. What we wanted to do was actually share with business owners, HR decision makers, and managers some of the tough decisions that people need to make. The government was offering subsidies and support on a frequent basis and upgrading them. So really giving people knowledge of what's going on and to provide information, tips, and strategies to help people navigate these very, very difficult times. If you get a chance and you want to, do tag us at PeopleBright and at hashtag COVID-19 TDBO. My name is Hilda Gann. I'm the founder, president, and chief people officer of PeopleBright Consulting and the creator of Connect with RevUp, an approach to helping managers be better managers and improve the work culture and create positive engagement. And how do I come by creating Connect with RevUp? I'm an award-winning work culture specialist. My husband and I co-founded iTrans, an engineering firm, back in the late 90s. We grew from 2 to 125 employees, 7 offices across Canada. And we made a special place to work where people felt engaged and challenged to really use their strengths. And we became recognized by the Great Work Institute as one of the best workplaces in Canada, top 10 twice. So I take that passion of what we did, and I really want to help companies be better companies. My background includes working in the healthcare field, human resources, of course, engineering, professional services, ITs, and not-for-profit. So today, what we're going to do is update the relevant legislation for businesses. And some of those changes are rent, temporary, seasonal, part-time students, and the Regional Recovery Fund. We're also going to do case studies. And I've got 3 separate case studies to talk about: layoffs and recall, remote work and Workshare. Then we'll have an open forum with questions on any topic you want related to businesses and the workplace. Finalize that with a summary on 3 key strategies to aid you in navigating through COVID-19. And last, share how we at PeopleBright can help. So here's some of the legislative changes that have been occurring. To last Friday, it seems to be a big flurry of changes that really have again improved the support that we as Canadians are getting. So I'm just going to really highlight some of those changes for you with what's in blue right now. The CERB, Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit, this is the one where you get the $500 a week. They've now added not only non-eligible people weeks ago, like business owners and stay-at-home parents, but now they've added part-time seasonal workers. And to go into the Canadian Service Canada website is where you should go. I just want to give you the highlights today. With regards to wage subsidies, the 75% and the 10%, the change happened about a week and a half ago, where the revenue that you were required to qualify reduced to 15% in the month of March and maintained itself during the to 30% for April and May. The calculations are year over year, so March 2019 to March 2020, or you can average the previous couple of months. So for March, you can take January and February and average it. In this case, it'll be 15% revenue drop. And then for April, it'd be February, March, the 30% revenue drop. And for May, March, and April, 30% drop. They've expanded it to any size company, not-for-profits, and charities. The other interesting thing is that if you do not qualify for the 10% wage subsidy, if you do not qualify for the 75% wage subsidy, you will be eligible for the 10% wage subsidy. And it is taken off your payroll tax when you submit it. So that 10% wage subsidy is instant. You do not have to wait for a check. You can actually apply it when you're submitting your payroll. One of the new things that happened last week was that the governments wanted to recognize those people who are essential services but are not making sufficient money. What they want to do is a top up so that every frontline worker is earning a minimum of $2,500. So that's a wage boost. And that details is still to unfold. With regards to the Canadian Emergency Business Account, the CEBA, the criteria for eligibility shifted from $50,000 minimum in your 2019 payroll down to $20,000. Other things that I want to highlight that happened was that there was a new Canadian Emergency Commerce Rent Assistance, CERCRA. I don't know, I'm making up how they pronounce the acronym. This one is designed for actual owners of property. They are to get the subsidy and pass that on to business owners. So details are unfolding on that. The other one last week that was announced was the Canadian Summer Jobs Program. It has been in existence before, and what they've done is modified it to make it easier and applicable to people to apply. Typically, you apply in February for March. They are now modifying that. There's no detail that I found up to Wednesday for that change, but they will supply up to 100% of wage subsidies from the original program of 50%. And in addition to that, they increase the age requirement up to 30 years of age. The summer job also extended to even into February of 2021. This is my understanding from what I've read is just for those on frontline and essential services. So it's not for us who are non-essential services and are working remotely in a non-essential services business. The last thing that they announced last Friday, details to follow because it is for the provinces to coordinate and collaborate with the federal government, is the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund. So this will be provincial specific because each province will adapt what the Canadian government has announced. So that's a lot of mouthful of information, but the government continues to update relevant legislation. And I think it may sound like it's annoyance, but it's a good thing because they're listening. They're listening to Canadians, they're listening to business owners, and they're trying to help all of us get through this together. And they're trying to help us to understand that they want to support us. The message which has been consistent for governments has been, be safe. We need to be safe. If we're going to get over the hurdles of COVID-19 and bring that the disease in check and control, then we have to stay safe and we have to practice social isolation. The second thing is be safe for your families. And that message is stay at home, be with your children. If you have children, educate them. And the last thing is we don't want you to worry. We want you to have a roof over your head. We want you to have, be able to feed your family, your loved ones. So those three key messages have been consistent since the start of COVID-19 in Canada. And I share that with you because really, as a company, as a business owner, you need to identify what is it that you want to send a message to your clients and to your staff. And that will guide you in terms of how you evolve your business. That will guide you in terms of how you share messages to your clients and to your staff, and what messages those are. So these next few slides are just quick highlights of those that I shared with on Business Survival 2.0 on Wednesday. I'm not going to belabor them because I want to get to the case studies, and then I want to get to open forum. So I'm Chinese, and in Chinese, the word for crisis is composed of two characters. Chinese use calligraphy in their language. And so the word crisis is composed of two words, danger and opportunity. And we are in crisis. COVID-19 is a pandemic global crisis. So briefly, what I shared yesterday was a Wednesday crisis from a danger perspective proposes risks to us as a business. And those four risks are disrupting your HR needs and requiring you to shift how you provide services, how you keep your business alive with your employees. What are they doing? Layoffs, Workshare, working remotely. It impacts on morale because people are afraid. And when people are afraid and insecure, they're anxious. And then they can't focus enough to be productive. They may be working remotely at home and feel isolation impacts. So that's another risk to your business. The fact that we do have that possibility of getting COVID-19 and acquiring it for somebody else, safety is an issue, particularly if you're in essential services. And then there's that constant ever-changing fabric where the government is providing changes to subsidies and support. We're constantly learning. Zoom, for example, had 10,000 people prior to COVID, and within 10 days, they jumped to 100,000. And even people are using it as a way of connecting with families and friends because we are in the social isolation. Crisis is also opportunity. And this is an opportunity to create a strong and healthy work culture. So that disrupted HR manager allows us to think of how we want to create our HR unit in a very different way, and to use your visionary processes to say, what do we need to become? What do we want to become? We need to try to improve our morale. We need to allay those fears of safety. And then with that ever-changing and the new norm, being adaptable, being creative, not being perfect, just get it out there, just start doing it and tweaking it. And then that's constant learning that we have, whether it's learning how to use Zoom or learning how to buy groceries. We were having a discussion prior to the start of this about groceries and how we do grocery shopping and how you plan ahead if you're going to do pickup. So I want to open it up now for discussion, and I'm going to have three different cases for you. One is going to be about layoffs and return to work. I'm going to share the scenario, and then I'd like to open it up for people's opinions. I certainly have been talking to a lot of clients and HR decision makers to get an understanding of kind of trends and what they're seeing, but I'm happy for people to kind of open up their mics and just have this conversation. So the first one I want to share is about layoffs and recalling to work. This example will be a service industry that is non-essential, so they're not open for doors. They have 15 people. On March 17th, everybody had to close their doors, so they closed their doors and they decided to lay off people. Well, they didn't really have a choice, but they laid off people. People didn't need to work remotely from home due to the nature of this particular service industry. The person who was the owner spoke with all the staff, but she didn't provide them letters, but she provided them with a conversation. And she told me that there were tears. There were tears because, you know, this is her business. She's had it for over 15 years. She knows all her staff, and she has very, very loyal staff. On April 13th, with the 75% wage subsidies, she was thinking of having staff return to work, some of them, not all of them. Keeping in mind that she would only have a couple that come in, stagger them, and then have that social distancing and making sure people, you know, were following the social distancing safety protocols. Now, so those staff had already applied for their CERB and got their first paycheck because it's literally $2,000 that they give you for those first 4 weeks. And I've heard some people get another $2,000 2 weeks later. So people need to keep a track of that so they don't have to pay back money that they spent. And some of those staff have said, well, geez, it doesn't make sense for me to return to work because I'm getting $500. If I come to work and you only pay me $300, I'm not going to be able to get my CERB subsidies. So she was in a conundrum what she should do. Should they reduce hours? She did reduce hours of full-time for some, but maybe not for others. And she also was eligible for 40K, so she started to apply for that. So that's case study number 1. And I'd like to open it up for people just to comment what they think, and I'll add to what was happening or what my recommendations would be. But any comments? So if you're talking, you need to, like Elmo, that friend has to unmute. Okay. Feel free to jump in or raise your hand so I know you're speaking or want to speak. But I think that the difficulty here was 2 things. Is when you have a business, you should really formalize the business. And I know a lot of business owners, sometimes they don't even have contracts for the employees. And but you should always document things. You should have something in file. Whenever you increase somebody's salary, when you promote them, these should be on file and staff should have a copy of them. She does have contracts for her employees. And one of the things that, if people had heard our discussion when we did HR and the law, one of the things in Canada is, well, let me step back a second. One of the things specifically to Ontario is that if you do not have an agreement that specifically refers to layoffs, then when you lay off people, they can actually come back and say that you have constructively dismissed them. So that's a terminology, constructive dismissal. And what that means is that by changing my hours of work, by laying me off, you did the equivalent of terminating me, even though you didn't officially terminate me. It felt like you terminated me, or you're trying to get me to quit. So then they can sue for wrongful dismissal and on the grounds of constructive dismissal. So this is a conundrum, and it is a conundrum that is applicable probably to well over 90% of businesses, because most lawyers will tell you that you should put that proviso in, but as a business owner, you make decisions. You make decisions of whether you increase risk by not having a contract, or minimize risk by including. So the fact that you didn't have this in your provisions results in a possibility that people might may decide to sue you for wrongful dismissal later on. The feeling out there is that the government may intervene, and that will solve things, saying that you can't do that. You can't sue for constructive dismissal on these grounds. But in the meantime, people, lawyers and HR decision makers are thinking the government, the judge, the courts may decide in favor of the employer that this was not something that, this was something that was forced upon businesses. They did not do this freely of their own will, and so therefore they should not be punished as a result. So that's one of the situations that would be a little bit of a risk for this particular employer. Does anybody have anything they want to say at this point? Okay, so the other thing that would be a concern too is, and we talked about it, if you're a non-essential service and you open your space, will somebody say something? Will there be a concern that the police will go around, particularly in Toronto? I know that the police were kind of checking things out and giving fines for where they felt people were kind of stepping over the legal requirements at the time. So she was afraid somebody would come knocking on the door and then fine her. She didn't want to do anything wrong, but she also wanted to think about the risk of keeping her staff and creating a goodwill for the future, but also doing what's right, but also making sure one survives. So those are some of the risks that she had. If there are any other comments, otherwise I'm going to go on to the next example.
Hilda?
Sure. Thanks,
Rex
Jenny.
has a comment.
Sure.
If you use the CWS, do you have to keep the employee for 12 weeks or can you use part? For example, 6 weeks, March 15th to April 30th, I don't know, /20, and then go on the CRB. And Rex, feel free to clarify your question if I'm not relaying this correctly.
I think that's an excellent question, and that's sometimes I'm on a chat line with other HR professionals, and we're trying to figure this out too. I think you need to step back. You need to check the legislation. The bottom line is you should not be double dipping. You can't do one thing and another thing simultaneously. But if you're doing something and then you switch over to another way of being subsidized that's still legitimate, that still qualifies, I think you can do that. So, and the reason I say that is that all organizations, businesses are shifting. You know, at one point you don't need staff, you lay them off. When you bring them back, then that's a different scenario. And what I love is this particular diagram from CFIB, the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses. When you Google CFIB, you'll go to their website, and as you scroll down, you'll see they actually have different headings for personal, for businesses, for business supports, and then you click in. And this particular diagram talks about wage subsidy amounts. And is the employee at arm's length? And if they are, here's a yes, no, and this is what you do. And the three different types of subsidies is the CERB, the 847, the 75% wage subsidy, and then the subsidy that's only 10%. So I think this diagram will help you, Rex, to figure out what it is. And again, just so long as you're not doing one, that you're complying with one and not applying for both at the same time. With the CERB, there was a change that allowed people to make up to $1,000 a month, like $250 a week, or $1,000 in a 4-week period. So I'm not sure if I answered your question correctly, but it really is digging in deep to find out whether it applies or not. So you should be able to do one and then the other, especially if the circumstances change. Do you have any other thoughts, or do you need me to elaborate, or do you need to clarify a bit more? Okay. The next one I want to talk about is remote working from home. So this was a consulting firm of 8 to 9 people, and This was prior to creating a state of emergency in Ontario. And the person phoned me on the Thursday before the week that we started our emergency, state of emergency, and said, Hilda, I'm thinking of laying off my staff. What have you heard out there? And she said, I think I want to do it. I want to do it today or tomorrow, which means writing the letters, figuring out what to do, and sharing that with the staff. And I said, I would not do that right now. If it's a difference between now and waiting till Monday or Tuesday, I would wait, because my understanding is the government is planning to make an announcement. And what I've heard, from inside sources is part of that will be some wage subsidy. So you will look much better if you wait till Tuesday, because then you'll know, rather than doing it today and realize, oh, I could have got a wage subsidy. That might have helped me. As it turned out, it was only 10%. So it didn't really make a big difference to people. So they would have gone ahead and done what they had already started. So by March 16th, she had to close her doors. She was a non-essential service. She did lay off some people, but she kept a few, and they were working remotely from home. And if you're working remotely from home, you need to think about some things that you should be doing. Don't need to do it right away, but if we sustain this, people should be thinking about creating remote from work policies. You might have done some things loosely, but here's some of the things you should think about. Policies and practices. You need to have a policy on working remotely from home, because you have expectations that they do things, and if they don't, you can share with them that their behavior is unacceptable and that they need to comply with the practices that we need. Comply is a really strong word, which I don't normally like, but I shared that. You need to think about ways to motivate people. You need to talk about, what are you going to do if you have performance concerns? What are the ground rules and the dress code? Because some people were, maybe coming to work in their pajamas. I was talking to one colleague and she said, we have actually instituted that people have to have a working space. This will result in people not working on their bed. So I guess that was something that they didn't want their people to do, because I guess if you're got a client, you don't want to see somebody that's, kind of comfortable in their bed and typing away. So they created some ground rules, they created some dress codes. Some companies will have morning meetings to kind of touch base and connect. And how will you deal with supervision? This company was eligible for the 40K CEBA. They were eligible for the 10% subsidy and the 75% wage subsidy. They're talking now about returning some people. I'm going to, again, ask if anybody has any comments or questions with regards to sort of the remote working right now. What I'm finding is more and more of my HR professionals are saying, yeah, we need to get a policy in place now. And these are larger organizations. When you're small, you can just share them or you can put them down in an email. But I think as we move forward, this whole concept of working remotely is going to be much more viable and usable. Some organizations had basically said, no, we don't do working remotely. I forget which company it was, but it was one of the large, big Fortune 500 that weeks before COVID came, emphatically announced that their people would not be working remotely from home. And then when the state of emergency came, their whole organization now became a remote working facility. So what was not feasible before changed and allowed people to be more adaptable and more give themselves permission. So I was talking to a lawyer the other day, and he says that wills now are an electronic signature is sufficient for a will. It was not, 5 weeks ago, but now it is. Telemedicine, having the ability for your physician to see you or phone call you and diagnose and provide treatment is now acceptable practice. These things were unheard of to be implemented, but in this time of COVID and social isolation, allowed people to rethink and allowed them to give permission. So will we be going back to the days where we sit in a doctor's office for 45 minutes with other people who have illnesses, or will we shift more to this ability to telemedicine, and similarly with other industries? Any other thoughts, questions? Anybody put a thing on the chat, Jenny?
No, so far no comments on the chat.
Okay, the last case is about Workshare. This is a large hospitality facility who had over 1,000 employees, and they had 150 locations, and overnight went down to essential service mode and resulted in only 50 of their operations still happening. The person told me she had to do 1,000 ROEs, which is amazing. They've decided now to do a Workshare program where their employees that are returning will do 2 days a week and 3 days off. So EI tops up the the salary or the compensation of employees by paying them 3 days equivalent of EI benefits. The company pays 2 days at full-time salary for that. So they have submitted it to the government, and the government changed. This was a program that had been in existence before, and the government modified the program so that now you could apply and only have to wait 10 days instead of 30 days. Both the employer and the employees are part of the application. In other words, the employee has to willingly say, I want to be part of this Workshare. I agree to the terms of this. What I'm finding, what she shared with me, is that even though you can start it 10 days after you apply, it is taking the government's up to 30 days to approve. So she actually had to institute it, and the employer and the employees are still waiting to see if it's been approved and whether they'll get their EI. In the meantime, they were not able to sustain their income payroll, so these people are exactly living that, and they are not getting paid the subsidy that the EI will provide. It's important when you're implementing this, is that you do your homework, you understand what it's going to cost the company, as well as what it will take for what the impact will be on employers. If you can give them some rough estimate of how much this will be, and then show how that compares to if they were totally on EI. So it helps employees understand that this is likely the better option, and that they will participate and sign. And when you do share the message with them, do it in a very respectful way, help them understand this is a win-win best case scenario, both for them as an individual and a family, as well as for the company. Because if the company doesn't implement this, they'll declare bankruptcy. I heard Neiman Marcus filed for bankruptcy earlier this week. So this is the reality, and this is how you message it. Any comments on that before we have we open it up for any questions that people have? Jenny, are there any comments?
No, not yet.
A quiet bunch today.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to share some key HR strategies for business survival. I think 3 of them are probably key. Remember, your employees are afraid. They're afraid for their family. They're afraid for their personal cash flow. They're not sure if they have job stability. And your ability to help allay whatever fears you can will help them then focus more on the job, which will enhance productivity. So communication is the key. Remember how I said the government had these 3 messages? You determine what your messages are and how you want to share them, and be consistent. So when you say things, you're helping the employee and your clients understand where you're coming from. think of the safety and implement any safety measures you need, and not just, safety masks and PPEs, but also helping them with their mental health. Each one of us is an individual, and we are coping with our stress in different ways. Learning that person's personality a bit more will help you. The introverts are worried about the constant change that disrupts routine. And I'm stereotyping, I understand. And the extroverts are telling me they're missing the touch of people and the togetherness. Zoom is a substitute, but it's not quite the same. So think about that. If you got people with families, tips and strategies that might help with work at home. And then really using this opportunity to engage your staff, to build that loyalty. So when we come out the other side, people are going to be more as a team, because you've survived this, you've had this experience together, and this will bond you. One of the things that we thought of at People Bright is there is so much that is uncertain right now, and those of us that have been working in the HR field understand a lot of what's going on. We're also learning too, but we have a lot more experience and exposure. So one of the things I decided to do was to create this HR on-call retainer services package. What it allows is for you as business owners, HR decision makers, to gain the expertise and the insight that I have and the connections that I have with other clients and HR experts to know what's going on and how to interpret it. And what we're offering is a 50% discount of my services for, instead of $600, for $300. And what it provides you is peace of mind. It's helping you navigate using our experience. And that 2 hours is accumulative. If you only need 15 minutes today, 45 minutes tomorrow, an hour 3 weeks from now, this is the package. $300, 2 hours for up to 6 weeks from the time that you purchase it. And it'll include a 30-minute strategy call. And for the first 10 people that register, my HR self-assessment audit to help you understand all the things you should be doing. And some of them are compliance regulations, and that will help you determine what you need to do as you move forward. Any other questions, comments today? I want to share the LinkedIn resources. Jenny, yes?
Well, I believe we should maybe ask questions to the audience to see whether they have any concerns or feedback about the case studies.
It's a good question. Do you have any concerns about the case studies, or do you have do you have scenarios that you wish to share? I know Rex had done one, but are there others? People contemplating Workshare, or have you had any concerns about the performance issues of your staff and how to deal with that if they're working remotely? All right.
Well,
So
I think one thing I would like to share is that just working remotely from home, and how do you kind of manage people's like their performance, right? How do you measure that when you are remotely working with each other and you can't really see what they're doing?
So you're asking me? I thought you were going to share, Jenny.
Well, I think it's a discussion, right? So it's your thoughts and then maybe my thoughts. I don't know.
Anybody have a thought out there?
One of the things that I could add, Hilda, is that listening to another group was the expectations around people's when they will actually work. So the fact that when they're home, they may have other activities that are going on if they've got kids or if they've got seniors that are at home and may need their attention at certain times in the day. Is that managers establish with the individual what is going to be their working hours. so that they may not be on when you expect everybody else to be on. And it's not the fact that they're not working, it's the fact that there's a different scheduling now because of the other demands of being home and being able to establish that with the individual ahead of time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think one of the things I find pre-COVID, when you worked remotely, there was an expectation of professionalism, and you would never, you know, have the microwave running or the kids popping in. And that's been allowed to happen. You know, when you talk to a client and if a child, you know, pops into the screen, it's a welcome thing rather than oh, what happened here. So I think there's a better understanding, but certainly you should find out if your staff have needs where they are homeschooling and they need to have some time during the day that is required. So having that dialogue is really important. I think too, with working remotely from home and this whole isolation is how do you cope with the stress right now? You know, what do you guys have any tips that are helping you stay sane? I was asked what was one of my bad habits in terms of the social isolation, and I pulled up a chocolate bar that I had, and I said, this is my weakness right now. These are really good chocolates. They got big fat almonds in them. So that's my little de-stressor, one of my bad habits. Any comments with this remote working, the social isolation, because I think it's starting to get to people. Okay, so I know that this is difficult times, and I think you are experiencing some impacts of socialization. If you've got employees, really think about how they might be doing it, and making sure that their mental health stays in check in a level of balance, and bring them back to that. I was going to point out the LinkedIn resources here. The one I really, really like, because it's handy and I don't have to go to 5 different places, is the resource for the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses. They update it regularly. The chart that I showed you, on Wednesday, it was a different chart. And because of the changes that evolved, they have updated it. And the chart before was pretty good and reflective of that time, but literally 2 days later, that chart had changed. So I really like this resource. They do provide some of their own tools, and they do provide direct links to the government sites. The other one that I want to point out is the one on the top. This is from Mars, and they have a collection of COVID-19 information, topics that are helpful and handy. So the other one is this economic response plan for Canadian and business owners. And then each of the different provinces, not all of them, but some of them are here and handy for you. Upcoming, we have 3 more topics, with more coming as we finalize them. Next week is talking about difficult conversations. I think people spend time trying to figure out, what am I going to say to this person? How am I going to say it? And sometimes they lose sleep, or they really stress about it. So next week is really devoted to those difficult conversations. So I'll share on Wednesday some of my tips and strategies, and even that first tip that I give you about how do you deal with the opening sentence and setting the tone. So I'll be sharing those tips and strategies, and then on the Friday, again, some diving into some work, some case studies, and then having that open discussion. The following Wednesday, Tracy Bissett, who is the owner and founder of Financial Fitness, she will be coming on and sharing some financial perspectives for business owners. And we're just finalizing what the topic will be later today, so you'll look out for that. I'd like to thank everybody for coming on today, and those of you who know that you want to hear it, but this isn't the right time of day, so I look forward to you listening to it on the YouTube or looking at the slides. Have a safe weekend, everybody, and keep your health in a good balance zone. Thank you for joining me. Much appreciated. Bye.